Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Love Podcast, a place where we share stories on how love can transform negative emotions and pain into strength. We talk about all things related to love, positivity, and kindness. And I am your host, Corinne Camara. Welcome to episode 49, From Seeking to Embodying Your Power. Abiola Abrams is an intuitive self-love coach, international retreat leader, Goddess Temple podcaster, and author of the new Hay House book, African Goddess Initiation, Sacred Rituals for Self-Love, Prosperity, and Joy. In today's episode, we talk about the power of our ancestors, African goddesses, rituals, self-love, and more. Let's get into this magical conversation. Hi, welcome to the Infinite Love Podcast. I am so excited. Today we have a beautiful goddess, Abiola. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited about this conversation in advance because I know it'll be magical.
I always start out the podcast talking about love and what your love lesson is. And essentially, a love lesson is your story of what happened in your life, what breakthroughs did you have, what was the catalyst for you becoming the woman that you are today?
Hmm. So there have been many catalysts because I've been on this planet now, thankfully, a long time, a while. But one of them that comes to mind a bit based on our pre-conversation that we had is that in 2010, or maybe it was between 2010 and 2012, I went back home to my parents' country of Guyana in South America for what we called a family reunion trip, but it really was a family union trip because I met a lot of family members that I had never met before, and many of them are my siblings who were born obviously before my father migrated to the United States. And I hadn't met a lot of them, didn't know a lot of them existed, to be honest with you. And met their kids, my nieces and nephews who are in my age group, so to speak. And it was a really beautiful and powerful and healing trip. I went with a lot of my American siblings and my parents, and it was a powerful trip. And one of the ways that it not only showed me deeper love, but helped me to fall more in love with myself, with, you know, us as women, and helped me to cement what my calling is, was learning about the stories about the women in the village where my family comes from. My parents are from a very small village in Guyana, but they met in New York City.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. And in this very tiny village, and I actually talk about this in my new book, African Goddess Initiation, but in this tiny village, they were the second group of people throughout the Caribbean and South America that were able to purchase their own village after emancipation. Actually, the first because they merged together with the other group. And the women of this tiny town, were instrumental in standing up for themselves, in showing, their power and their pride. And it just was a wonderful experience.
So you're pretty much coming from a lineage of leaders and healers and people that change the culture of their world, essentially.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it has been very healing just to learn certain things about my family and about my lineage, who are healers and teachers and creatives and all of that.
It's so important to have that knowledge because it really is helpful, especially with the African diaspora, like having that awareness that we do come from this great, amazing, powerful lineage.
Yes. Yes, and I would encourage anyone who is listening to this, to go and research your family to whatever degree you're able to interview your elders,
Hmm.
while we have them. I interviewed both of my parents last year, sat them down, did a formal interview with them. It's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I did that with my mom. I should do that with my dad. I did that with my
Yes,
mom to ask, like, who were the healers, like, who were the midwives, and to learn that
yes,
I had all these people in my lineage made so much
yes.
sense because my whole life I wanted to do a certain thing. I always wanted to be a healer, but then I'm like, where did that come from? But then to see
Mm.
that, okay, I have so many ancestors that were doing this similar type of work.
Yes, yes. Interview your dad. And you said that right now he's back home in Guinea.
Yeah,
So
he's
this is
back
a
home.
good time to do it because then he might call cousin so and so come and people like that. And what I want to tell you is the first thing they're going to say is, "Well, I don't know anything. I don't have anything to share." But they have a wealth of knowledge.
Hmm. I love that you're bringing the conversation of Africa because it's such it's dear to me, and you wrote a book about it. So how did that all come about that you wrote this book, which I have to say I wish it was out years ago because I was always like there's not enough tarot cards and books that have people that look like us. And I've always been wanting that. So I'd love to hear how your creative process around that and what was your inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you, sis. It really was a divine project. I feel that the ancestors said to me, "This is what you need to do." In fact, I know that they said to me that this is what you need to do. I've been doing goddess work for a really long time, but this specific work, which is focused on the divine feminine and, giving us a journey through our lineage throughout, Africa is not only the 54 plus countries on the continent, but it is all of us throughout the diaspora, those of us who were trafficked and kidnapped, throughout the South America, Central America, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the United States, of course. And then people, who have migrated here.
Right.
We are here and we are still Africa. Africa is still within us. And I tried to first resist writing this book. I really did, have a refusal of the call because it seemed, so enormous. And because I know that there is a lot of fear
Hmm.
and self-hatred that comes up, um, fear and hatred, period, whenever you talk about African divinity and our power. And a lot of it comes from the outside, but unfortunately, a lot of it comes from the inside as well, from within the community, from people, who are kind of very resistant because of the way that our story of us has been told. And if you
Hmm.
really want to oppress a people, this is in the oppressor's rule book. First you oppress them, then you get them to oppress and hate themselves, you
100%.
know and so every day I receive messages from people saying, why are you talking this African mumbo jumbo and all kinds of things like that. But every day I also get messages from people saying, thank you. Thank you so much for uplifting us. Thank you for telling us our story in a different way. Thank you. And there's so many things that, there were three levels of consciousness of me writing and downloading this book. So there was the first level of, for me as an intuitive, as a healer, as someone who, the downloads, the
Yeah.
transmissions straight from the ancestors. Then there was the level of me going and speaking to people, interviewing people in my family, in my lineage, and in other lineages, and getting knowledge there. And then just as an academic, also going and doing the research and things that I'm going to stop talking for in a second, but it just was beautiful and astounding, the things that I knew that I didn't know that I knew, but
Hmm.
also the things that I learned that
Right.
I you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. 100%. And one of the questions I'd love to ask you is a lot of people say, God, I do goddess work or I'm connected to the divine feminine. Could you explain how what your
Yes.
interpretation is of the goddess work that you do or that you have done in the past?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love this question, sis, because um like I said in the beginning, thankfully I'm grateful that I've been on this planet now for a while. And when I recently graduated from college, this is back in the early 00s, late 90s,
Mm-hmm.
um, is when my goddess journey started. And as a coming out of college, I created with my friend Antoy Grant. We created a show called Goddess City that was at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in New York City,
Oh, wow.
and toured and was a number of different places. We had a lot of our luminaries stand by us, and we went to Amiri Baraka's home in New Jersey, and his wife Amina Baraka was a big supporter of this work. The late great August Wilson at the National Black Theater Festival, like it was phenomenal
Oh,
and
wow.
overwhelming, to be so young and be doing this work.
Hmm.
And then from there, I started doing, because of the nature of the show. We talked a lot about a lot of uncomfortable conversations. We
Okay.
talked about things like rape,
Hmm.
and female genital circumcision,
Hmm.
and a lot of different things that were uncomfortable topics. So
Right.
every show naturally led itself into being a town hall, a
Hmm.
discussion. And from there, I started doing goddess circles in my living room, which then led to today. So to answer your question, um, goddess divinity for me has been realizing, to quote the late great Ntozake Shange, I found God in myself and I loved her fiercely. That is the
Hmm.
most simple, at its most basic level, at its most simplistic level, knowing that you are the goddess, you are the temple. And then there are many layers after that.
So doing the healing for yourself, and because I feel like for a lot of people, especially I speak for myself as a black woman growing up, this
Mm-hmm.
you get so much negative messaging about your skin color, not feeling worthy, feeling like we have to work extra just to be even considered equal, and all the negative bombardment that we have to go through. And a lot of it ends up being the internal work that we end up doing as adults. And
Yes.
finding that goddess within you, I feel like that takes a lot of internal work, right? Like being able to
Yes.
undo those negative thought patterns.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, when I look at you and I look at me and our chocolate skin, and our kinky hair and our beautiful wide features, you look like my family and perhaps are,
Yeah.
and, you know, um, and to live and be in a country and in a time where now for me on another side of it, it seems ludicrous and ridiculous when I look at the phenomenal beauty that you are, that we would walk and that people would not see that, and it makes me emotional.
Hmm.
Like how could that be? Like it seems insane. It seems as insane as not realizing that water is wet, that fire is hot, you know.
Right.
And yet that's where we have been, and where in many cases sadly we still are. I was so sad that a short while back I was speaking at right before the pandemic. I was speaking to a group of high school kids, and they were talking about colorism, and they said, miss, did you have this, did colorism exist when you were growing up? And I was like, oh my gosh, like they don't even realize that this is just the latest iteration of something that unfortunately has been going on for generations. But thankfully now, people are waking up, are awakening to the fact that, that this is not alternative beauty, this is the beauty.
Right. And then
This is, yes.
it's painful, especially when it's in within the black community, like the whole idea of colorism and just having to be look at yourself and be like, how, and not only is the world, the Caucasian world, putting me to the side. Now it's within my own community.
Yes.
And I think for me, it's been that journey of going within, finding my own beauty, finding my own everything that I need within myself and coming from that place. Because if you're always expecting the outside world to heal you, then you're never really going to ever be healed.
That's it. That is it exactly. That what you are looking for on the outside, you're going to continue to chase.
Right.
Right. So people, we talk about that, you and I, as we're in New York. So it's hustle city and chasing money and chasing this and chasing, but whatever you're chasing is running from you. So if you're chasing your own power, chasing your own divinity, chasing your own beauty, like that, it's going to continue to be elusive. And
Right.
just because it has been taken from you doesn't mean that you leave it in that state. It is about a reclamation of your own power, a reclamation of your own beauty, a reclamation of your own divinity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, talking about goddess circles. I went to my first goddess circle in New York City when right out of college as well. I had no idea what any of this was. So I went to this whole thing and it was all white girls, a few Asians here and there. And
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I had no idea what this whole world was about. And when I thought about goddesses or when I was shown goddesses, um, they're always white, right? And so now
Yeah.
I'm just thinking now on this other side, and I've done Afro-Cuban, Afro-Brazilian. So now we learn the whole Yoruba tradition and all these other goddesses that I'm like, I had no idea even existed. So I'd love for you to speak on all those African deities that we never really get to hear about that you've introduced in your work.
Yes. So this is what is so exciting because a lot of this has been buried, not by accident,
Mm-hmm.
but purposefully so. Let me just show you in my book. This is the book, African Goddess Initiation. You see, I have post-its in here from a recent teaching that I was doing, but it has throughout it. So, beginning in Dahomey which is now Benin, with Maulisa, and there are goddesses from throughout the diaspora. So we learn a lot about when you start to do this work about the Yoruba Orishas,
Mm-hmm.
but there are divine goddesses from every single culture in throughout the African diaspora. And so, for example, this is goddess Ngame, who is a goddess of the moon, triple moon goddess. And one of the interesting things about her is that the the divine in this culture is known as Inyame. So with the small difference of a Y instead of a G. And the way the oral tradition is that the divine was originally feminine and was changed, through the patriarchal structure into the divine masculine. And a lot of people have the misconception, for example, when they look at African divinity, because there are certain, even though it's all completely different, there are a lot of things that are the same. So you will see a lot of different deities that, throughout the diaspora, we hid in saints and angels and fables and tall tales and all of those kinds of things. But and people mistake it for polytheism, but there's always a highest power, and then it's similar to saints and angels. And so it's that the highest power, the divine, God, source, energy, whatever you want to call universal, the universe, is too big to be accessed by humans. And so having the go-between of your ancestors and the goddesses is where the power comes in. And I share rituals for each one. And so there's, for example, Erzuli Dantor, and there's Erzuli Freda. Erzuli is a whole family from Haiti. As I said, sharing from throughout the diaspora. And then because a big part of our divinity as African people is ancestors, there are also African queens who are featured as a part of this work. And so there's Queen Nandi Zulu. I call her mother of Shaka Zulu. And for example, from my country, there's a song about a woman named Satira, who is supposedly like a loose woman. And so in this book, I've reclaimed her as a goddess because, again, we hid our goddesses in songs and fables and tall tales. Marie Laveau is here as one of the ancestors in this book. And so, and the same with the deck
cards.
of oracle cards have the same goddesses in the deck. And so here's Oshun on the cover. Yes, as a daughter of Oshun, I was like, okay, Mama has to be on the cover.
Of course, Oshun has to be the cover. She's the beauty, the
She
mirror.
is. She
The
is.
water.
She is. Yes, the sweetness, the
Yeah,
honey.
honey.
Yes. And this is Goddess Ocean here.
Love it.
And so, yeah, so I'll just show you like just maybe 5 of these. So here's Mam Kumba Bang of Senegal, and she is one of the river goddesses. She is the goddess of the St. Louis River in Senegal. There are many river goddesses in Senegal, and unfortunately, the tradition is dying out of people who know how to give her praise, which is to come to the river and give her your voice. And there's a song and a dance and so much that, unfortunately is being lost. And so a big part of this project for me was also capturing our history, our stories, our spirituality before it is lost, before it is tossed away. Here's another goddess from Southern Africa, goddess Inko Sazana, who is the goddess of healers. And as you can see, she's a rainbow goddess. She appears on the mists and on the rainbows. And before you come to her, you must do a spiritual bath and bathe the children. And there are specific rituals for the women and for the men before you approach her. And she helps the corn to grow. Nice. She helps the corn to grow. And a very interesting story is that the colonizers had kind of stopped the indigenous people of the area from doing the songs and the dances, from making the corn to grow. And now science is showing that, that of course, when you speak to crops and, voice and, it helps them to grow.
To grow, right.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because now there's a crisis with the crops in that area. And I'm like, maybe let's sing to them as Inko Sazana would have you do. This is Mbuya Nahanda, who is a reoccurring lion spirit that has occurred for generations. And it's a beautiful and powerful story. The only way to say it is takes possession. She takes possession of women leaders throughout time. And the most recent incarnation that is acknowledged was Mbuya Nahanda, who was a freedom fighter over age 55 in Zimbabwe, who stood up to the colonizers at the time, and her community is trying to get her remains back. Her remains were given to Queen Victoria as a war prize. Yes, and so they're trying now to get her remains back of the last acknowledged Nahanda. A lot of people come forward and say that they are the next Nahanda, but if you're unable to answer the questions that they have, then you are denied as a Nahanda.
So I love the fact that you have the cards and the book. So do they work together or separate, or how should people purchase it?
So the cards and the book absolutely work together. And I'm so excited because I just found out yesterday that because the cards are already a bestseller, they're #1 in their category on Amazon, that they moved the date up. So the cards are now coming out. You can pre-order them right now. They're coming out on the 5th of October.
Wow.
And yeah, and everything right now, at the time of this recording, it may not be true by the time people watch this, but at the time of this recording, everything on hayhouse.com, my publisher, Hay House, everything on their site is 50% off. So you can go and get the book and the cards there for 50% off. But that may be not true by the time you're watching this. So the cards and the book. So let me just show you the similarities and differences. So I'll use this copy. So each of the goddesses in the book, for each goddess, I tell you her story and then share with you a traditional ritual from throughout the African diaspora, and share with you an empowering lesson related to the goddess. So essentially what her lesson is, what she has come to teach us, what she wants us to know. So here's, for example, is Goddess Ngame, the moon goddess. And so she is the goddess of desire. So here is her message. And I recording the audiobook for this was wild because the messages in part start with a greeting in the original language of the culture of the goddess, which I know with my New York my New Yorkese, I can't even like I butcher my own accent. And so so then tells the goddess's story. It tells, so then let's talk desire. So it talks about desire and the divine feminine. And then it talks about how to honor the goddess, gives you information on how to honor her. And then a sacred ritual that is from the diaspora. Here, this one is the Konkuma menstrual broom. And I'll let people, if you want to read about that, that's on page 88. It's about using the broom as a spiritual tool and the way that they do in Ashanti culture with a menstrual broom. And then a ritual is given for us to do. That is a self-love ritual.
I love
so, yeah, and then affirmations. And so that's how the book is structured. And the book is structured through 9 inner temples, which is similar to a chakra system, but it's a system that I downloaded that is specifically for us. So it starts with the temple of ancestors, the inner temple of conjurers, the temple of warriors, the temple of lovers, the temple of griots, which is about the voice and storytelling, and the temple of queens, which is the third eye, and the temple of high priestesses, which is the crown chakra. And then in the card deck, the cards are also divided into those same temples. All of the goddesses and queens and ancestors who are in the book are in the deck. The deck only has one additional energy that is not in the book, and that is Mamlambo, who is a South African spirit. One of the powerful ways to use the deck, because it can be used for divination, which runs through every African culture, but it can also be used for personal development. And actually, the best divination is a combination of both. Right. And so there are shadow cards in the deck, and there's a temple of shadows within the book that is all about us confronting our inner shadow selves and issues like sacred rage, like self-sabotage, the things that hold us back from stepping into our true divine goddess power.
I love it. How do you incorporate divine masculinity in this world? Because it's always about the balance, like being able to tap into your femininity, but also our divine masculine that's balancing within us.
It's so important that in the very first chapter of the book, the Guardian chapter, that there is the dual deity Maulisa, which represents the sun and the moon, and together they are one entity, the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And this is the altar that I just did for full moon circle, and this is Maulisa, the divine masculine and feminine together, because it is very, very important. It's very important spiritually, and it's important for us as spiritual beings having a human experience. And so the divine masculine, a big part of it is taking inspired action. So you can come to this practice and go through each initiation that each goddess has to offer. You can, there's a meditation album to accompany it and all of that. But then you must take inspired
action in your life for the things that, incorporating these things into your life for your own evolution. That's why we're here, for each of us to evolve and evolve the consciousness, evolve our community, evolve our tribe, evolve our bloodlines. That's why we're here.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into the infinite love questions.
Yes.
So my first question is, how do you use love in your work?
Oh my goodness. My work is all love. It is all love. The affirmation that you have behind you is one of my favorites that I use a lot in my teachings, where I say, you are loved and you are loved. You are loved and you are loved. And my work is about us, again, coming back to reclaim our own power and realizing that the face of the divine is you, that, it begins with loving yourself. It begins with loving yourself. And it's all about love. Everything is either love or fear. Are you choosing love or are you choosing fear?
Right.
And if we could remember at any moment, if you're trying to make a decision, what is the most self-loving choice I can make? Or what is the most loving choice that I could make? Those are two very strong guidelines for how we would want to go forward in this world.
I love that. Thank you so much for saying that. And one of the things I think about love is it's an inclusive. So I know there are people that are listening to this and they're like, oh, I don't have African descent, which I think everyone does. But for some people that they don't believe they come from Africa, they can still tap into the work that you're doing, right? It's for everyone.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you said that. It's so important to me that it is both in the book. I put in a specific, it's not a disclaimer, but it's a specific calling and offering, saying that I don't invite people to this sacred goddess circle that is this work. Spirit invites you to this circle. And so if you are watching this and you're within the sound of my voice, within the energy of my heartbeat, and this resonates with you, then it is for you. And the beautiful sister, Anita Kopach, who wrote my foreword, she ended up writing the same thing, saying that, if you feel it, it's for you. And the important thing is that just like we take gifts from other cultures, yoga and feng shui and Kabbalah, there are gifts that we receive from other cultures. And it has just been that the gifts from our cultures have been devalued, and they are just as potent, just as powerful, and just as important.
Absolutely, 100%. And I just want everyone to feel that inclusiveness in the work that you do, because I feel like sometimes when it's like for Black people, people are like, oh, it's not for me, but it's for everyone. Yeah.
Yes, I answer those questions too every day.
And how is your work used to serve humanity?
So my work is used to serve humanity because until all of us are free, or you're putting forward the energy of all of us being free, then you can't feel freedom yourself. In this moment, I feel free and I feel liberation in my bones and in my body and in my soul. And it's important, if you are feeling that, to bring others along, each one carry one, each one bring one, each one teach one. That is how humanity advances. And I remember years ago, I was in a class in New York City at this place called The Kitchen, which is this art center in New York, in Lower Manhattan. And they brought in as a guest teacher Yoko Ono, and people were talking about, this is maybe around like 2007 or 8 or something like that. And so people were talking about war and, and all of that and what they could do. And I remember she said, go home and fix the teacups in your cabinet. Everybody's like, where's this lady talking about? Like, she's bugging, like, what? And what she was really saying was, you know, clean up your own porch, clean up your own yard, clean up your own energy, clean up what you have access to, clean up your own spirit. And, you know, and if you have the propensity to be able to do more for others, then definitely do more. But you have to begin with the self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. What does it mean to you to be a positive force of goodness in the world?
I love that question. I love that question. For me, it means, I think, living out my truth and my lineage, you know, that this is what I was born to do. And so clearly with you, for example, also that this is what you were born to do. This is what we were born to do. And so when I learn things about my family, or for example, the fact that my great grandmother was a midwife and the equivalent of a woman's fertility healer, or that, you know, one of my mom's lineage came from Ghana specifically to, they were, as a part of the trafficking, brought as healers and doctors. And so they are the only group to have retained their original surname because they were brought to be healers. I know that that is my divine purpose, and it takes many different forms. There are many different ways to be, you know, a healer. There are healers who are dancing ballet. There are healers who are, you know, delivering the mail. There are healers doing all sorts of things, but this is how my offerings are coming through.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing to be able to do the work that we do and that we love it and it's our purpose. And it's such a blessing to be able to do something that feels like a calling, but also it's something that is used to uplift others.
It really is, sis. It really is. And one of the cool things, you know, is seeing the world kind of catch up, you know? And so it's really cool because, you know, almost any time prior to this, you know, people were always like, oh, that weird goddess stuff that you do, or that weird goddess girl, or, you know, all of those kinds of things. Or when I started doing retreats, or when my first deck, the African Goddess affirmation cards came out, I think it was like in 2014, or, you know, people were like, what is that? Why are you doing that? And so, you know, evolution is happening quickly and people are catching up, and hearing other people acknowledge, you know, it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, I think it's great that now people know what Reiki is, and you can talk about crystals and people are not like, whoa, what is that? Like, it's, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are still questioning that, but I guess in our world, or at least in California and in New York, it's much more of an open conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I remember, you know, when I was a kid, I remember being a kid, and I remember my dad doing yoga in the late 80s and it being weird, you know, like it being like, he was strange, he was weird, you know. And so the fact that that is so common and commonplace now, you know, people are catching up. Sure. I've given talks to major corporations about meditation. Mm-hmm. And, you know, again, 5 years ago, that would have been unheard of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, times are changing. What do you most love about your life?
Oh, what do I most love about my life? Oh, I most love that I feel like I am surrounded by love. You know, the theme of your podcast. I happen to have been blessed with amazing parents who thankfully are still here on this planet, and I'm still learning from them and they're still learning from me. I have incredible siblings and family and, you know, friends, and just I'm surrounded by love. And that's what I'm most passionate about. You know, that the other, everything else is great, but it all starts again with, you know, the foundation, and that's a key part of my foundation. And the beautiful part of writing this book is that I created this like a Facebook group for my mom's family. And because we're spread out. We're in Canada, we're in the UK, of course, we're in Guyana, throughout the world. And so for us to come together and to gather our history and tell our stories and all of that, and just learning so much about my own family, like it's made me love them even more. Yeah. This is an important question in this conversation, particularly talking about the divine feminine, because I would assume that the people that you attract to you are, as you are, an empath and a giver and all of those things that I can feel energetically from you. And traditionally within this tribe of people like us, it is easy for us to be givers. It is easy for us to give love. It is easy for us to give empathy. It is easy for us to give compassion. It's easy for us to give compliments, money, whatever. But the receiving part of it, which is the divine feminine energy, tends to be more challenging. And so a few years ago, I gave myself the divine assignment of learning to be a better receiver of love and being loved, a better receiver of abundance and money, a better receiver, period. And so I receive love and it's an ongoing practice. Don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted. It's an ongoing learning practice, but I receive love today by having the courage to ask for it in places where it is deficient, whether that means, from my, whether it's from my man or from my mom or from my, whatever it is, learning how to ask for what we need is so important. Absolutely. It's so important. And as strong women, who are raised, you're strong and you're all of this, that we often miss that, which is, the power to receive is our birthright.
Yes. When do you feel the most love?
When do I feel the most loved? I feel the most loved. I feel like it's when I am around people who I loved and people I feel comfortable with. For me, as an introvert, and as an empath, I'm very guarded about my energy and where I spend my time and where I spend my energy and all of that. And so in a lot of situations, I'm just, kind of there, but, quiet and observing. But when I'm around my peoples, which could mean, from my family to my clients on retreat or whoever, I am then, my mouth is going and I'm in my element and in a beautiful co-creative dance with them.
Love it. And my last question, which is my absolute favorite question, where has love created a miracle in your life?
Ooh, oh my gosh, so many places. Let me see if I can think of one that I can talk about. Where has love created a miracle? I would say one of the miracles, and it's just on my mind, I think, since we are talking about this book specifically, one of the places that love has created a miracle is in answering the calling to write this book, having love of myself and love of my culture and love of my sisters, and really wanting what has become really a textbook of our divinity and our goddesses and our culture. This book by itself is a miracle. That I wrote it during the pandemic, for 9 months during the pandemic. For a big part of that, I was at my parents' home. I left my Manhattan apartment. If you can hear sirens, because I live in Manhattan. I left my Manhattan apartment And I went and stayed with my parents for 8 months during the pandemic, and then came back afterward to finish the book. And I knew that in 2020 that my divine assignment was to write a book and to help others to do the same. And so I was teaching a course on writing a book that's a part of my Manifesting University. I was teaching a course on writing a book. And I wrote 2 other books, 2 shorter books on spiritual business and other topics beforehand, trying to resist writing this book. And I was blocked in every area of my life. When you're going against what your own ashe, your own energy is, you will feel blocked. And I was feeling this blockage. And I first couldn't decipher, was it specifically around this project, or was it around what was happening in the world, which everything around us was unknown and seemed to be falling apart. And when I said, okay, this is what I am needing to do, everything opened up. Hay House, gave me a contract, and everything fell in line. And, my family started sharing stories with me about their truths. The family member who brought it to me and to everyone within our family circle that our family has been written about in books and was brought to, came to South America, to Guyana, in order to be healers. And that's why we have our original surname. He ended up dying of coronavirus. He died of COVID last summer. We never got to meet in person. He's my cousin in Guyana, older cousin in Guyana, and we never got to meet in person. And had I not been following the guidance, we would have lost that part of history and not even put that together. And so for me, it's been a lesson of, and I would encourage anyone who is watching this to answer the callings that you are getting, from the divine. It's all in love, and the voice of the divine will always speak to you, sometimes with firm love, sometimes with tough love, but it will always be an energy of love. And so to follow what you're being called forward to do.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. How can people purchase a book, find your information, and work with you if that's something that they're interested in doing?
Yeah, so thank you first of all, for this incredible conversation. This was awesome and inspiring, and will be, I'm sure, the first of many conversations that we will be having, as I feel very in alignment with you. The book, African Goddess Initiation, Sacred Rituals of Self-Love, Prosperity, and Joy, is available wherever you buy books. So wherever you purchase books from, you can find it. The direct link, if you want to purchase from Amazon, is tinyurl.com/thegoddessbook, tinyurl.com/thegoddessbook. But you can find the link to that, to the cards, to everything at my site, which is womanifesting.com. So like manifesting.com, but womanifesting.com. And you can pre-order the cards now. There's also a meditation program called Enter the Goddess Temple, and an upcoming goddess course that I just spent last weekend filming in Manhattan, filming in Brooklyn, New York. So a lot of goodies to come. Womanifesting.com is the best way to go. And if you're looking for free resources to empower you on your goddess journey, go to AfricanGoddessClub.com, AfricanGoddessClub.com. And you can find me throughout social media at Abiola TV, Abiola TV, where the TV stands for transformation and victory.
I love it. And all that information will be in the show notes. I am sending you so much love. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate your presence and all your wisdom that you're here to share, and all the work that you're spreading in the world. It's amazing.
Thank you, sis. Thank you for your beauty inside and out and making this world a better place.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and tune in on Tuesdays for new episodes. For more information about me, please follow me on Instagram at Corinne J. Camara, and my website, CorinneCamara.com. Sending you lots of infinite love.